Hello and welcome to Drone On, the only podcast in the air and on the airwaves. I am your host, Bryce Bladen, and today's topic is how LayerDrone became the world's largest drone imagery network. I am joined today by Alec Wilson, COO of Spexi. Alec, pleasure to have you on.
Thanks for having me, Bryce.
Let's start with your personal story of how you got into drones.
Well, when I was flying helicopters for a living in the late sort of 2018, 2019, 2020s, they were really exploding. The tech was just coming into itself. There was no regulation yet for them, but everyone was talking about drones. They had them, they were using them on the weekends, they were starting to come into more commercial settings. And I started seeing them show up more and more in our job sites, helicopter job sites, when I was on the ground talking to the guys, whether it be logging, forestry, or mining exploration, or like inspection of lines or infrastructure. They would be around, and I was always really curious about the technology. And then I actually had to, I was flying tourists around in the low Vancouver airspace, and I had to dodge one. There was one hovering like at 1,500 feet above downtown Vancouver and kind of saw in my eye, and I literally had to like evasive maneuver to avoid it. And I, threw people on board with me. And so I was really just like, okay, these things are everywhere. Like, what is going on with them? And in and around that time, around 2017, I met someone named Kate Klassen, and she was working on drone regulation. She, like me, was a commercial pilot, but she was on fixed wing side, and she was speaking with Transport Canada and the regulators about, how this industry should be regulated. What should we be doing to integrate drones safely into the manned airspace? And her and I hit it off, and she was involved with some of the owners of the helicopter company I was working with. And so we all decided to get this company called Coastal Drone going, which would be this training, regulatory advisory entity to help Transport Canada, the government, but then also all these drone pilots in Canada to figure out how best to get drones into the integrated into the manned airspace. And so that was my foray. Coastal Drone started doing really well. It got a lot of attention after these new regulations came out because it was really the only online company in Canada to enable pilots to get up to the standards for training. And so, before we knew it, there was 10,000 people that had gone through our products, and we did some really cool deals with Best Buy and other retailers like London Drugs to make all of our products available to their customers. And from there, I was just really fascinated by the business. I was running the business. I was still flying helicopters at the same time. And it was during that time around late 2019, 2020s where I met Bill, who's the CEO of Spexi, and in the early stages of building a software platform to put drones to work with software. And I was always interested in figuring out how to leverage the community that was built by our company to put them to work. And, software is the perfect way to standardize that kind of thing. So Bill and I quickly realized that we should be working together, and the rest is history.
Fantastic. So one thing I do find very interesting about that is your origin story for drones is kind of like me saying, I almost hit a deer on the highway. And ever since then, it's been deers.
I mean, I don't think it was because I almost, I had to dodge a drone that I got interested in them. I was still interested in them. But I think for me, that highlighted this need of integration and integration from the perspective of people that are in the air, right? That have to deal with the consequences of being in the air. And if something goes wrong up there, the consequences are high. So I think it made me more motivated to be on the regulatory side and help the government understand what some of the nuances and realities of drones in the airspace are. But being on the regulator side as you're starting to bring this technology in is like drones or aircraft. Aircraft are regulated in most countries by the Aviation Authority. And so you really can't go much faster than how those regulations come into effect. And so I wanted to also be part of making sure that hopefully that those regulations were fit for purpose and they weren't going to stifle innovation too much, but also enable the safe integration of aircraft.
Speaking of trying to do something new while doing it according to regulations, best practices, and the people involved, perhaps we should get into why the COO of Spexi is talking to me about LayerDrone. Let's explain what LayerDrone is. Let's start there. What is LayerDrone? What was the founding vision?
LayerDrone is a cryptoeconomic protocol and network that enables standardized ultra-high resolution drone imagery to be made available to anyone that wants to interact with it. It's a set of rules and it's a set of processes and technology that enable many people, drone pilots in particular, on the supply side to interact with it. It provides the structure for pilots to contribute high quality standardized imagery to it. It houses that data in a governance network that is controlled in part by the people that own it, and then makes it available to customers. And so crypto economic piece is that it's built on the blockchain. So the rules around how that data is moved in and moved out and how people are compensated for that and how LayerDrone wants to move around in the world is in part governed by the people that own tokens that are associated to that network protocol, which there is no token yet, but there will be one in the future. We understand. And it is the largest of its kind in the world. So it was spun out of Spexi's tech stack because, we realized that there needed to be this open source common good network that enabled all of this activity. And Spexi is its founding core contributor. So we create technology that interfaces with the protocol. We make it easier and possible for pilots to contribute data to the network using our mobile application, which is powered by LayerDrone. And we make it easier for customers or data buyers or the demand side to pull data out of the LayerDrone network, which is mostly just raw. The LayerDrone stores the data as raw imagery coming in from the drones, and it standardizes that process and indexes it. And then Spexi can come in and pay LayerDrone for access to that data and then make that data into more valuable data products for its customers. And that's the same for any company that might want to do that. So LayerDrone will publish the standards for which anyone to go build applications to pull data from it, and also to build applications to contribute data to it. And so Spexi is the first of these to do that with LayerDrone, but I think, it would be great to see more.
Gotcha. So up to this point, Spexi has been handling both the demand side of the network, i.e. customers who pay for the data, and the supply side. What's the nature of that relationship since LayerDrone has been created?
Well, the drone pilots use Spexi's applications to contribute data to LayerDrone, but they ultimately are LayerDrone community pilots. They belong to the LayerDrone network, and Spexi is a software provider to that network. So they understand the Spexi brand, and they were involved in that before, but really they are going to be and will want to be where all the ownership is, where the incentives are, where the origin of digital ownership lies, which is LayerDrone and the LayerDrone Foundation and the LayerDrone protocol. So they're very much tied into the future of LayerDrone. They'll have a say in what it does and how it moves itself into the future. It moves into new countries, and it will be and is already an incredibly vibrant community and place for people that are like-minded, that have drones, that love drones, that like to fly their drones and contribute to a ever-updating ultra-high resolution base map of the world, which the demand side, the customers, can interact with at crazy scales. And so the customers that get to see this data are just amazed by its quality, by its freshness, by its detail. Nothing like this has ever been produced on Earth at this kind of scale. Drones have been around for a long time. They've been producing data and imagery and videos for years and years and years. But there's not ever been an effort to coordinate and standardize that data at scale. And that's really what LayerDrone does at its core. It standardizes and coordinates many different drones and their pilots to contribute to an ultra high resolution standardized base map of the Earth. And so customers get to imagine what they might be able to build with access to that kind of data. And, we're seeing some really interesting use cases already in these super early days, like this launch of physical AI or spatial AI or large geospatial models or large world models, or, there's a few names for them now. But what is the next generation of spatially in the real world thinking AI? I think the best way I've heard it described is LLMs are book smart, and they are really good at semantically telling you things and what's going on, and they can read images and tell you about them, but try to get an LLM to go direct a robot in the physical world and have it understand how to navigate, and it will fall on its face. And that's where this next generation of spatial AI comes into play. And in order for that kind of AI to work, it needs to be trained on the best imagery and data it can get its hands on. And LayerDrone has that data, the best, highest resolution aerial perspective data over urban environments. And so we're seeing a ton of interest on the customer side of these crazy, well-funded tech companies wanting to interact with it. And so that's like such an exciting thing to see. But all the way down to the mundane use cases like city planning and, carbon credit verification, and insurance companies and construction companies just wanting a better understanding of how the world is updated in a higher temporal scale than what they can get from satellites, or higher resolution than what they can get from satellites. So it really does cross a big spectrum on the demand side, which is really exciting. And I think the use cases are nearly endless.
Very, very interesting. So to just position LayerDrone in listeners' minds, at the start of 2025, Spexi had been functioning quite well as a successful business up to that point. And then I believe it was Q2 2025 that the LayerDrone Foundation was effectively announced and spun out of Spexi. And at the time of this recording, I don't believe the token generation event or anything related to that has occurred. But I would be really curious from your perspective about put this simply, what keeps you up at night with like this big swing you are effectively taking? LayerDrone is all very new sounding, whereas Spexi has almost a decade of success where you didn't have to do this. And, maybe there's a rationale that you're going to succeed so much more through LayerDrone, or maybe there's something else here I'm not seeing. But I'd be really curious, as somebody who's been in this space for this long, like what was the catalyst and what's the concern and what excites you about it?
Well, I think we felt that LayerDrone as a public good that was an open source network and protocol that was owned by the people that contribute to it and governed by the people that contribute it over time was the most exciting, valuable, interesting, forward-thinking, way for this to exist, and the biggest we could think it could get. Like, think about the biggest thing that you could do in this space, and I think LayerDrone represents that. It's a crypto economic protocol that incentivizes mass data capture at scale and makes that available to customers that want to buy it. It's a Web3 view of the world, and we're big optimists here, and we think that Web3 is a really interesting way that the internet is going to be organized and composed of in the future. And the world is still quite a bit behind in its thinking about Web3. We've been believers since 2022 roughly, which in crypto is a long time, but really it's not at all. So I think it was just a clear view for us. I mean, we had saw in late 2021 we ran into a network called Helium, which was doing this for wireless networks and incentivizing people to set up wireless stations in their homes and provide connectivity and then reward them in crypto for doing that. And it was just such a fascinating use case for how this could work into the future. And I think we quickly drew the parallel that you could do this with an aerial imaging network. It would be hard and I know almost unfathomable in some ways, but I think we saw the vision and now it's manifested in LayerDrone and it's got its own path and its own governance and structure, and it's so cool to see. So I think what keeps me up at night is just the amount of ways this can all go, the possibilities and direction that LayerDrone I think has in front of it, and Spexi as a core contributor to be able to work with it together is almost endless, and I think sometimes that can be overwhelming. And it's a big aviation movement. There's a lot of aircraft moving on that network at any given time, and I think making sure that's done correctly and pilots are being responsible and safe is something I think about a lot. And one of the great things about this network too is that it gives pilots a lot of agency. It's at their discretion to interact or contribute to the network. They're in command at all times. The Spexi mobile app is an autonomous system. It controls their drone autonomously, but they are always in control of the drone and can take back manual control at any time. And so making sure that pilots, have a good understanding of all of that, but also the responsibility that they have as people that are operating aircraft in the airspace. And back to the way we started this call of my experience dodging them in the low Vancouver airspace, kind of full circle here, right? So, I've made sure that the design of this network is with all of that at the best practices and safety. And, drone heights are not above even 300 feet. They're not even 400 feet, which is the guideline or the rule, but they're at 260 feet. The spexagons are 25-acre spexagons, which promote visual line of sight flight. They're the perfect size that you can actually maintain visual line of sight flight at all times while the drone is imaging its hex. And the mobile app has tons of safety features and guidelines built into it to make pilots' lives easier. There's lots more work to be done, but it's just a big kind of movement that way. And I think it's really exciting, but it's also sometimes overwhelming.
It's a lot. It's a lot for all the right reasons in my mind. Whenever I need to explain the why of blockchain or crypto or Web3, what it usually comes down to is the technology is good at letting two people transfer value with no one in the middle. And what I find so interesting about what Spexi is doing with LayerDrone is, from a certain perspective, you are removing yourselves as the middlemen. Like, you are basically giving pilots a lot more agency than they would have had a year ago if this all goes to plan, and a lot more, frankly, control if your plans for governance, or rather if LayerDrone's plans for governance and things of that effect all come together. But also for all of Spexi's goals, that is possibly an enablement layer. When I think about the actual utility of things like blockchain, what I was just saying before, international payments in general, trying to equate value to work that maybe doesn't equate to a one-to-one dollar figure. These are all exceptionally good use cases of the technology, and they all seem to be reasons behind what Spexi and LayerDrone are trying to accomplish. With all that said, if I misspoke on any of that, please feel free to correct me, but I'd otherwise love if you could let our listeners know how they can follow along with everything you're doing.
Yeah, well, no, I don't think you misspoke at all. I think, the crypto economics and networks and, two-sided marketplaces are a great fit done correctly. I think it is one of the most powerful forces of network effects that we will see in our generation. Hard to do correctly, so making sure that the economics make sense, the expansion isn't too fast, there's enough utility and revenue in the network to justify all of the expansion. Those are things that I think, we've thought about for a long time, and I know that LayerDrone is continuing to advance itself on. But ultimately, the principles you had there are correct. So how do you follow Spexi? Spexi Geospatial, at Spexi Geospatial on Twitter, X, and LinkedIn is Spexi, and Facebook, Instagram, whatever. And LayerDrone is LayerDrone.org, Spexi.com. You'll see, I think it's fairly well laid out now how these two entities are related, but also just separate and distinct, and are on their own paths. And so it's just a really exciting time.
Fantastic. All right, Alec, if you have time, I would like to take you to one of my favorite segments of the show, Innovation or Idiotic. I am going to tell you 2 lies and a truth about recent innovative drone applications, and you need to tell me which one is real. First up, DJI developed an empathy drone in 2020 that uses facial recognition to detect human emotions, automatically adjusting its flight pattern when it detects fear, and higher when sensing excitement or joy. Number 2, Tesla filed patents for underground drone tunnels in 2019, essentially subway systems for autonomous delivery drones that would travel through the existing infrastructure to avoid airspace regulations. Third one, Wing has a specialized team of drone psychologists who study the behavioral patterns of birds to design flight paths that don't interact with them.
I need to tell you which one is a lie.
You need to tell me which one of those exists.
Okay. I don't think Tesla did that, because I know Elon Musk hates flying stuff, and he believes that, but it does make sense because he thinks they should all be underground.
It's rockets or it's tunnels.
He doesn't hate flying stuff. He doesn't hate flying stuff. He doesn't like drones. I know that. He can't imagine a future where drones are buzzing over everyone's heads loudly, which I agree with, which is why the drones are very small on LayerDrone's network, by the way. The DJI emotional one, that is possible. And then the last one, bird patterns. It's all possible. That's tough. Okay, I think the bird one is true.
You nailed it. Wing was nice. Google's attempt at drone delivery in 2019. I kept that detail out of it because I felt like that really added it some legitimacy. That would have given away the game. But yeah, good read. I actually had another one for you tied to this. I recently learned that Iceland was doing drone delivery to rural areas, but they were getting attacked by the terns that were nesting out there. And so now if you get a delivery drone in Iceland, it has a nice little scarecrow on top of it to scare away the birds, which I think is just neat.
Yeah, the birds are, I've been attacked in helicopters by birds. Like, I've been swooped by eagles, like, coming at the helicopter many times. Happens all the time when you're flying in the mountains or in the forest. And it's like, you death wish, like, you will die. Like, we will not die. I'm in a helicopter, but if a big eagle hits a helicopter, it's not good. So you don't want it to happen, but birds are kind of nuts.
That is nuts. I've only been attacked by a bird once, and it was when I was at an age where the bird was bigger than me. So it made a lot of sense. And I was like, hey, I see how they came from dinosaurs, but just throwing themselves at aircraft, that's awesome. Cool. Great. Good job, birds. All right. Thank you, Alex, so much for joining us today. Thanks for listening to Drone On. Subscribe wherever you get your podcasts to get a new episode every week, and leave us a 5-star review on your podcast app of choice. You can learn more about our sponsors at spexi.com, that's spexi.com, and LayerDrone.org. Find out how you can contribute to the world's largest drone imagery network too. Thanks again for listening.